Hello everyone and welcome to today's Ecology Live special. I'm Pete Manning, I'm the chair of the events committee for the British Ecological Society, and I'm glad to see you here today. This is an Ecology Live special, which is obviously part of the Ecology Live series, but also the first plenary of the Festival of Ecology, which is the replacement event for the BES annual meeting this year. I'll just start this. The Festival of Ecology will be running from the 14th of the 18th of December this year. It's an online meeting, and we've worked really hard to bring as many of the features you would find at a normal ecological conference and at our normal annual meeting at the Festival of Ecology. There's still time to register, so make sure that you do. And I'll say a little bit more about what's happening at the meeting at the end of the talk today. So next I want to introduce Jane Hill, who's our speaker today. But firstly, I just want to say a little bit about our sponsors of Ecology Live. They're Wiley, the multinational publishing company that focuses on academic publishing and instructional materials, and NHBS, UK-based natural history and instrument supplier. I'm going to now say a little bit about Jane, who is a professor of ecology at the University of York in the UK, and her work is at the intersection of climate change and conservation ecology with a specialism on butterflies. But today she's going to talk about 12 months in ecology, a year like no other before. I should also mention that Jane is the chair of the Publications Committee for the BES and a trustee of the BES, and also a host of Ecology Live. So Jane's going to talk about 12 months in ecology. For those of you who've been to the annual meeting before, you'll know this is a regular slot we have there. And so this is a special tie-in between the Ecology Live series and a regular slot of the plenary for the normal BES annual meeting. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Jane. I'm really looking forward to see your take on what's been a remarkable year. Thank you.
Great, thanks ever so much, Pete. I'll just
okay,
check
so
my screen. Okay, so thanks ever so much for inviting me, and obviously this is going to be a really short talk, isn't it? Because I don't think very much has happened over the last 12 months, has it? But seriously, it's a really great opportunity to be able to provide a personal perspective of what's been going on in ecology over the last 12 months. So before I get started, first of all, I'd just like to say a huge thanks to all of my collaborators and colleagues and my research group. It's just been such a challenge, hasn't it, to keep going with all of our research and our teaching over the last 12 months. So it's been a real pleasure working with everybody, and thank you so much for keeping me sane. It's also exciting times here in York. The new Leverhulme Centre for Anthropocene Biodiversity has just been opened, so there's exciting times ahead. So watch this space for things that are going on there. And also it's been a huge privilege to work with my colleagues in YESI as well. So thank you ever so much. The other thing, as Peter's already mentioned, this is part of the Ecology Live series, and I'm just so impressed with the BES at getting this set of talks get going quite soon after we entered the first lockdown, when things were looking really bleak and people were getting very isolated. So it was a real pleasure to work with the BES to bring together this Ecology Live series, and also to invite the 20 absolutely fantastic speakers who really presented some world-class and really exciting research. That was a real privilege. and obviously for us, it was great to be able to invite those 20 people that we wanted to listen to and invite into our homes and find out all about the research. So that was great. And of course, there's lots more to come next year when the Ecology Live will continue be back in 2021. And of course, isn't it a shame that we can't meet in person for the annual meeting? So for those of you who were at the BES annual meeting last year at this time, absolutely fantastic meeting in Belfast. And of course this year it was supposed to be Edinburgh, which would have been lovely at this time of year to be in Edinburgh for the 2020 meeting, but of course it's going to be a fantastic meeting online. And of course this 12 months in ecology talk is traditionally on the last day, first thing in the morning, after the night before when there's been the Ceilidh. So perhaps I'm quite pleased that I don't have that slot this year after all. So just thinking and looking back over 2020, well, it's not going to be a year that most of us will remember very positively, I'm sure. And when I was thinking about what I was going to cover and what I was going to talk about today, I sort of look back and remembered the talk that Helen Roy gave for this 12 months in ecology last year. And it was such a uplifting and inspiring talk. And Helen was so positive. So I thought I'll take a leaf out of her book and I'll try and do the same. So I will try and pick out things that I think have been positive this year. And of course, thinking about 2021 and as we recover from the pandemic, hopefully there'll be lots of opportunities for ecologists to have an input into that. So I just thought I'd just say a few words about my perspective about what have been the really key ecological issues this year. And of course, some of those are the same as they have been for many years. So of course, we know that the temperature records keep on being broken, and the projections are, it looks like 2020 is going to be the hottest year on record, going to take over from 2016, that was the previous hottest year. And then of course there have been other hot years, but they've often recently been due to influences as well from the ENSO effects. So anyway, temperature records keep being broken, and 2020 looks as though it's going to be the hottest on record. And of course, looking forward to next year, we've got COP26 that's happening about this time next year. And so that's going to be a great opportunity for countries to commit to the climate pledges and really focus our attention on that. So while the temperature has been rising, what else do I think, looking back over 2020? Well, very sadly, it's about the record-breaking fires. Been huge fires in Australia, of course, and also on the west coast of the US. And also real concerns about the fires in Siberia, of course. And those are huge threats. So huge threats to people and their livelihoods, and of course also to the global climate, and also to biodiversity as well. But then, of course, what are we going to remember 2024? Well, it's mostly, I guess, going to be around the global pandemic and how we've been affected by that, and looking forward to what's going to happen as we come out of this pandemic, given that there's the great news about vaccines coming soon. So I'm just going to pick up about 4 or 5 topics that I think have really impressed me over the last year. So this is very much from a personal perspective, and I say I'm trying to stick with Helen Roy and be very positive when we're looking back over 2020. So the first really good thing from a UK perspective is this recent announcement by the Prime Minister committing to 30% of the UK landscape being protected by 2030. So that's absolutely fantastic. We could say, why has it taken so long, given that many other countries have been committing to their 30% protection from the UN for a long time. So I guess maybe the UK is a little bit behind the curve here, but nonetheless, this is great to have this commitment very clearly laid out. Unfortunately, of course, this comes after the decade, the UN decade on biodiversity, 2011 to 2020, when it's clear that we failed to meet HE targets to conserve biodiversity. So a lot of those HE targets have been missed. Now we're going to be having new targets, and this target about protecting 30% of the land. So that's absolutely great. Of course, in the UK, already about 26% of the land is protected. So we're looking to protect an additional 4%. But that raises a whole loads of questions about, well, is 30% enough? What's already being protected and why? And lots of other questions about what do we actually mean by protected areas? Because from a UK perspective, for that 26% of the land that's protected, well, less than 10% of that falls within the Natura 2000 network. So these are the sort of areas that we traditionally think of as nature reserves and our triple SIs. They actually cover a very small proportion of that. And a lot of protected areas are protected because of the landscape quality and so on. So it's thinking about what do we mean by protected areas, and is that going to protect and halt the biodiversity decline of rare and threatened and species? And of course, it also adds to questions about, well, what about people within these landscapes, and about what about all of the other demands and requirements there are for landscapes that obviously once they've been set aside for protection means that they're not available for other things. So as with a lot of things, the actual announcement is very straightforward and is to be welcomed, and then the devil will be in the detail about exactly how we will reach that, that commitment. And I just thought I'd give an example of an absolutely fantastic reserve. This is Rough Bank Reserve in Gloucestershire, which is a reserve very close to my heart. This is an example of what can be achieved with, in a really small area, but with some really great conservation management. So this is a reserve that was a triple SI. It was purchased by Butterfly Conservation back in 2012. And if anybody is listening who is not a member of Butterfly Conservation, then why aren't you? You should be. They're absolutely fantastic organisation doing some great things for nature in the UK. So this is an example of what can be achieved. So as I say, this Rough Bank Reserve is only about 10 hectares. It's quite small, but it's part of a network of other sites within the Slad Valley in Gloucestershire. And this reserve, even though it's very small, supports about a quarter of UK butterfly species, which is an absolutely fantastic place. So do visit if you, when you can, and when you live, if you live nearby. Brilliant. But I just thought I'd mention some of the other work that we've been doing in my group. So this is in Malaysia, and we've been working with Malaysian and US scientists, and also with social NGOs and with the State Forestry Department to help them prioritise rainforest areas to protect in order to reach their commitment. They want to find an additional 300,000 hectares of forest to protect to meet their UN CBD goals. So this has been ongoing for a while. And this has been a very interesting exercise to go through, to have those discussions about what to prioritise and where, thinking very much about prioritising rare and threatened species, as well as unique ecosystems, protecting carbon, and also thinking about conserving for protected areas for connectivity and also for dispersal corridors. So trying to bring all of those components in terms of making a decision about where those 300,000 hectares will be to protect, and helping very much with that decision making. And then also thinking about what those impacts are for people who live nearby to those areas that are going to be slated for protection. So this has been a really interesting to contribute to, and a really positive thing to be doing. But I would point out about issues about what to protect and what do we want to focus on, because in this case there's very little primary forest left. So this is about protecting areas of degraded and logged forest. And it sort of begs the question in this case about what is forest and what do we actually want to protect. Because protecting degraded and logged forest, obviously in the longer term, is a good thing to do as that recovers and returns to a more semblance more of primary forest. I want to just change tack a little bit and move on to another topic that I'm very interested in, thinking very much about when areas of, once they've been protected, not necessarily all the biodiversity may return, may not be able to return if these areas are too isolated to be reached. So thinking about reintroductions of species, and obviously if you work within the Leverhulme Centre here at York and you work with Chris Thomas, then you talk a lot about moving species around and reintroducing them and all of the exciting things you can do to boost biodiversity locally. And obviously there's been a lot of discussion around rewilding as well. And this is a great example that's ongoing at the moment, a reintroduction here of the checkered skipper back into England. So the checkered skipper occurs in Scotland, but disappeared from England in 1970s. And this is an ongoing reintroduction of the species into forest areas around Northamptonshire as part of the Back from the Brink programme. So it'll be really interesting to see how this continues and the success of these over the next few years. But when we start talking about reintroductions, then it's quite interesting because you start also talking about what's the difference between a reintroduction and a translocation. So then talking very much about reintroducing species back into locations where they once occurred versus moving species back into locations, or moving species rather, into locations where they've never occurred. And then of course, when do we think, how far back do we go in terms of when they have occurred there or not? So anyway, this is an example of a reintroduction. And then if we're talking about reintroductions of butterflies, well, you can't, this is the textbook example. This is an absolutely fantastic example of success with Jeremy Thomas and colleagues about reintroducing the large blue into the UK. And I was lucky enough to visit Daneway Banks last summer and see the butterfly. It's a fantastic tourist attraction as well. It's just brilliant. And thinking here about how this was a fantastic example of how you need to understand about the causes of species declines before you can successfully reintroduce them. And of course, with the case of the large blue, it was all about its link to an ant. And once you understand these abiotic and biotic factors, you can successfully reintroduce the species. And this is ongoing with more and more sites being added and the species being introduced to many more sites in the southwest. So this is a great example of how we can reverse declines in species. But what about translocations then, when thinking about moving species into locations where they've never been recorded before? And so I just thought this got me reminiscing about this translocation that we were involved with, moving the marbled white butterfly into a location in the UK where it had never been recorded before. So this was an interesting exercise to go through. You can read more about it in Steve Willis's paper there in Conservation Letters. I would say carrying this out was quite polarised between people who were super enthusiastic and people who thought it was a terrible idea. We moved the butterfly from populations in Yorkshire, moved north up into County Durham, into this nature reserve here in Wingate. So this was about 20 years ago. It's successfully flourishing there. And interestingly now, people seem to have forgotten that it was a translocation. As you can see here, when you look on the signboard for the nature reserve, they now consider that the butterfly is particularly special to the site. And I think people really value having it nearby. So it raises a whole load of questions about what we move, what we translocate, and why. And of course, if we're thinking about reintroductions and so on, there's this fantastic example of white storks. So this is work that Dr. Aldina Franco is involved with. I was hoping to go to the Knepp Estate. So this is where there's a lot of rewilding going on. And the Knepp Estate in East Sussex is where this white stork reintroduction has taken place. So you can see here several white storks were released at this site in Sussex after not being recorded in the UK for centuries. Really exciting work here, and this article here that was picked up by The Guardian, and the work that Aldina and colleagues are doing about fixing GPS trackers so that we can follow the storks around, and they were recorded a lot along the south coast of Britain over the summer, and now they're heading south, migrating south down into North Africa. Get onto that website and you can find out more, and then hopefully we'll see them returning next year. So this is just amazing about the sort of technology that we have, and also about just amazing the distances that animals move on their migration. So I think this is just a brilliant story. Okay, changing track again. Well, as an entomologist, it's hard to avoid Insectageddon. So these are my sort of personal viewpoint about things that have been going on this year. And of course, Insectageddon has not gone away, and there's lots of really exciting science that is happening at the moment around this topic. So one of the things that has always surprised me, I guess, is that way back in 2004, Jeremy Thomas and colleagues published this paper in Science comparing losses in the UK of butterflies, birds and plants. And so way back in 2004, they made this very strong statement about us looking as though we were experiencing the 6th major extinction event, and showing how much worse butterflies were faring than the birds and plants. And that something like 70% of butterfly species in the UK were in decline. Now, of course, for a lot of ecologists, this was a really worrying paper, and it led to a lot more research in this area, a lot more ongoing research in this area. But it didn't seem to get picked up more broadly than that. And so that's why I put the sort of question mark in terms of, you know, why wasn't there more interest and concern? Because then this paper came out in 2019, making showing, getting a lot of worry and people being worried about this, because they made a much stronger statement about 40% of insects threatened with extinction. And of course that then coined this term of Insectageddon, and then since then it's been hugely at the forefront of the general public's mind and concern. So it's interesting that general public didn't seem to worry too much about a 6th major extinction event, but now they're worried about 40% of insect species being threatened. And of course, there's been a lot of discussion since then about the degree to which these estimates are robust or not. And so, as you can see here, what I've listed a whole load of papers that have come out over the last 12 months or so that have tackled this question. And of course, there's huge issues about the data sets that are used, about which species are declining and about how much, and which species are winners and losers, and what the different data sets tell us. So there's been a bit of an ongoing debate here. First of all, picking out the fact that some moths, this work here by Callum McGregor and colleagues, about there are actually good evidence for some species increasing as well as those declining, and then picking up here about other winners, and then picking out the losers, and then showing where there were declines, and then perhaps where there were not declines, and even some of these using the same data sets. So anyway, I just thought there was a very nice commentary here by Dornelis and Daskalova, and I just thought I picked out that rather positive conclusion about hopeful examples of wins as well as accurate reporting of the worrying declines. So I just want to stick with Insectageddon to say one more thing around this, and this is picking up again on Callum McGregor's paper with colleagues, showing how the importance of long-term and long-running data sets, and this is his work here on the left, picking out that in fact for biomass of moths in the UK was actually higher than it is, there was more biomass than there is sorry, you can see the patterns of the biomass change over time in the UK, and the degree to which that's changed across the different habitat types in the UK. And also you can see that historically there was actually an increase in biomass followed by the decline now. And then if you look across to the right there for the paper by Didham and colleagues, who were obviously inspired by the graph on the left, picking out some of the pitfalls and the major challenges in terms of how we should be analysing these data sets, thinking about shifting baselines, about the length of the data set, and also about the high variability amongst interannual variability for insects. And all of these affects our ability to actually make good and robust conclusions about what is going on in terms of insect changes in the UK and globally. And one of the things, of course, it does pick out is if you're analysing abundance trends, and then there are amazing data sets in the UK, of course, going back to the 1960s, and also long-term data sets in the US. But one of the things it has brought attention to is that actually the data for elsewhere in the world is not so good, and much more needs to be done in terms of understanding patterns of change in other parts of the world and different ecosystems. But there's going to be a lot more happening in this space, I'm sure, and lots more exciting research and lots more to be found out about Insectageddon over in the future. So again, just changing track again and just picking out another really positive thing that has come out. And again, this is the UK commitment to have the UK government here made another press release linked through again to its new environment bill, setting out commitments to remove deforestation from supply chains. So it's great that there are these zero deforestation commitments now that are being discussed. And this is something that's very interesting to me and to my research group here at York, because we've been spending a lot of time thinking about the impacts on tropical rainforest of production of oil palm. And clearly we all know that oil palm has a big impact on tropical deforestation. So the sorts of things that are really important and really important to discuss and to understand around the causes of tropical deforestation. Well, as you can see here, the key drivers of deforestation in the tropics are beef, and then soy, and then oil palm, and then wood and paper products. So this is quite interesting because beef is actually causing about 10 times the amount of deforestation than, say, oil palm. Although I guess we shouldn't really be in discussion about which is less bad. I mean, they're all having big impacts. Although a lot of the focus, of course, is around oil palm, and there needs to be more around soy and beef. And the sort of things that are important here about how our agricultural practices in the UK and our food choices in the UK have global impacts. I mean, most of our food choices when we go to the supermarket, we're buying food that is either not necessarily being produced in the UK, or if it is, it has other impacts on production more widely. So our choices that we make and the consequences of those are global. So when we're thinking about how companies are going to meet these zero deforestation commitments, we're thinking about what are our expectations of a consumer in terms of what we think a zero deforestation commitment might have, and whether that might actually have some unintended consequences that we're not aware of. As in all things, that there's going to be complexity to this, and also issues around the governance of it. And then from a very pragmatic perspective, if you're having a zero deforestation commitment, well, it begs the question then, what is forest? And how do you go about identifying forest and in order to protect it and to conserve it? And so from a really fantastic aim for a zero deforestation commitment, actually implementing that is clearly going to be a lot more complex. And as I say, what in my group here in York, we do a lot of work around oil palm and about how to reduce the environmental impacts of oil palm. And as you can see here, I've included the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, the RSPO logo there, which appears on some products. And so if you're interested in buying products with sustainable palm oil, this is the logo that you should be looking for, but it's quite challenging to work out what those products are, and it requires a huge amount of effort on the consumer's part to ensure that that's actually what they are buying. And then the final thing I'd like to raise is about 2020, is that it's shown that there are huge inequalities within society, and one of the things that I've been doing work around for many years is around inequalities in relation to gender, and particularly gender within STEM. So I'd just like to finish off just saying a few things about this and trying to stay positive again. So one of the things, I guess, that has been really disappointing in the UK, so the UK has been committed to gender equality in STEM through the Athena Swan Award process, and a really huge plus to that came about a few years ago was when the Chief Medical Officer, Dame Sally Davis, linked medical funding in the UK to holding an Athena Swan Award. And as you can see here on the right, this is a paper that was published just a couple of months ago, which showed the benefits of that and how that was improving the women holding awards and getting funding. So that image that I've downloaded there from Twitter on the right was a really positive thing. But unfortunately, at the same time, the UK government has had a action to reduce bureaucracy. And who would have thought that gender equality was linked through to a bureaucratic burden? So really sadly, they have removed that link between funding and Athena Swan from medical perspectives. Anyway, I guess we wait and see. The hope was that it would be Athena Swan would be improved rather than ditched, but let's wait and see. But in a much more positive way, I'm really proud to be a member of the British Ecological Society at this time, where they're doing so many fantastic EDI initiatives. There's obviously a lot more to be done, but as an ecological society, it's absolutely fantastic that they're so innovative and leading edge. So really proud to be a member of the society. And do get involved, of course, in these different networks and so on. So yeah, so what have I learned from 2020? So this is my final slide. What have I learned? Well, it's fantastic making jam, really restful, but I'm shocked how much sugar there goes into jam. It's just really sugar, isn't it? That's all jam is. What else? There is absolutely no chance of living off your allotment. But that's not the point, is it? Growing things is just so restful and positive thing to do. But as I say, you have no chance of feeding yourself from an allotment. We've all had to stay, not being able to travel. I've really missed not being able to do field work and visit all my friends and collaborators around the world. Been really disappointing, but on the other hand, I have discovered that holidays in the UK are fabulous, and isn't it amazing, the countryside that's nearby. And I've also discovered how much wildlife there is in my backyard from spending such a long time at home. So that's my personal perspective. So thank you ever so much again for inviting me, and really looking forward to 2021. It's going to be so much better, isn't it? Thank you.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks a lot for that talk. It was really great to hear a positive take on a year where it's not always been it's not always been easy to find the positives. And I'm also delighted to see that you've ended on a picture of the beach at Sea Houses, which is actually where my mum lives. It's where I'm from. So it's very nice to see my local area, which I've not been able to visit myself this year. So yeah, thank you very much. We've got some questions for you, if that's okay. And the first of these is from Shahia Khan, who says it's great to hear about the reintroduction of species. What's the current status of the checkered skipper after 2018? Is it increasing and occupying nearby areas, or is it restricted in its reintroduced area?
I don't know. It's not something I'm involved with, so my information would come from the same information that you would be able to find by Googling it and looking on the web to see. I guess they've probably struggled this year to do the surveys because of not having access during lockdown. But I know there are quite a few researchers who are following up on this, and PhD students and so on. So yeah, just wait and see and find out about the success of that project. But there's a Back from the Brink webpage and lots of really good information there.
Thank you. Thanks. So the next question is from Marco de Beljac, who asks, why is light pollution and its negative synergistic effects with chemical pollution, such as pesticides and climate change, not more in focus for ecological studies, despite a 50% drop in insects in the last 40 years, and when 80% of the land is exposed to light pollution?
I think there is a lot of interest and concern about light pollution. I know it was a focus of study in the UK by NERC funder, and I know there's been an increase in the number of studies looking into artificial light at night as a concern about a driver of decline. It's not my area of expertise, but clearly over and above other drivers like invasive species and habitat loss and climate change, then the impacts of pesticides and chemical fertilizers and so on natural environments, as well as artificial light at night, are having big impacts as well. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. And then just one final question from Kat Jones, who asks, the RSPO, great for finding deforestation deforestation-free palm oil, but is there equivalence for beef and soy? So, for example, there was shown recently in a Guardian investigation that the cerrado is being damaged by chicken being fed from Amazonian cerrado-based soy. Is there any equivalent products or labeling for these kind of products?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, because it's about how people want, how we all want to be understanding a lot more about where our food comes from and the information that we need in order to make those choices and decisions. I feel quite fortunate that I can make decisions around things to do with the sourcing of products, but obviously very often what you buy and where you buy your product, your food from, can have a huge impact on price, and that's a real concern about what choices people will end up having to make if they're having to go for the cheapest food that may not necessarily have the greatest, having quite negative impacts on the environment. So how do you do that? Well, I guess you go to supermarkets, or you go to locations where you know that they're sourcing their products with minimal or with reduced environmental impacts, and you can go online and find out which supermarkets those might be. And so, for instance, if you're interested in oil palm, then Chester Zoo has quite a good shopping list online which tells you where to go. Yeah, there is a sustainable soy initiative as well, but these supply chains get very complicated, don't they, as the questioner has picked out. And you're thinking about buying chicken, but then you're having to think about what that chicken has been fed on, and then that leads back to Amazonian deforestation. So I think this is a really positive message about trying to remove deforestation from supply chains. And then the question is, how does that actually happen, and does it reach the consumer expectation about what we want from sustainable food?
Thanks a lot for that, Jane. I think we have to finish there just for time reasons. There's a whole load more questions, which hopefully we'll be able to address on YouTube as we're recording the video. And if you want to see any more, then you can hopefully have a look at Jane's answer to your questions on there. I'm just going to finish today by talking about the Festival of Ecology. This is BES's online annual meeting, which is happening this year. We've got a whole host of different features within the meeting, which I hope you're interested in. We've got 5 more plenary speakers, thematic sessions, which will be live as well as live interactive workshops. There's a whole load of live and on-demand content. We've got nearly 1,200 delegates coming to the meeting. And so there's a huge amount of material for you to have a look at there. And you can still register as well on the website link, which you see right here. So I hope to see you there for what should be a great online meeting this Christmas from the 14th to the 18th of December. So with that, I just want to finally thank our sponsors again, Wiley, who support Ecology Live and the Festival of Ecology, and NHBS, the supplier of equipment and books for ecologists. Thank you very much. Goodbye.